Discipline is one of the deepest ways you can prove that you love yourself. I know this sounds strange because every single time we hear about discipline, we think of punishment. Things like waking up early, working when you're tired, saying no to things that you want, and doing things that you don't feel like doing. I know this sounds harsh, but what if discipline isn't about being hard on yourself? What if it's about caring so much about your future self that you're willing to disappoint your present self? Because sometimes loving yourself means saying no to what seems good right now and making way to what seems better in the future. And I've started to realize something. The person who always loves you the most isn't the one always making you feel good. Sometimes it's the person who tells the truth. Sometimes it's that person who tells you to move out of the bed. Sometimes it's the person who tells you you've wasted enough time, let's go back to work. And sometimes that person has to be you. I want you to think about the person that you genuinely love. If you had a younger brother who was constantly destroying their future, would you just sit there and watch them do it? If you had a friend who constantly spent every night scrolling but then later complained about their life, would you just keep quiet? Probably not. You would tell them the truth. You would tell them to go to sleep. You would tell them to stop wasting their lives. You would probably have that uncomfortable conversation because you would be knowing where their life is going. But the surprising thing is that when it comes to ourselves, we usually do the opposite. We start negotiating with ourselves and start saying things like, I'm tired, I do not feel ready, I had a rough week and I need some rest. And sometimes those things are true, but sometimes we are not resting. We are just trying to run away. But I want you to learn this. Discipline is self-love with a long-term perspective. It is all about choosing what your future self needs in contrast to what your present self wants. And that's it. It's not about hating yourself, but it's about respecting yourself enough to stop betraying yourself. Because every single time you tell yourself that you're going to do something, but then you do it not, something changes within you. You slowly stop trusting in yourself. Every single time you say, I'm going to go out for a run, and you don't. You say, I'm going to study, and you don't. You say you're going to stop scrolling and you don't. Eventually, your own promises don't mean anything to you, and that's a terrible way to live. So here's the first way to practice discipline and self-love. Start by keeping small promises to yourself. Don't start by saying, tomorrow I'm going to change my life. That's emotions talking. Say, tomorrow I'm going to wake up at 6:30, then do it. Say, I'm going to put my phone away while I work, then do it. Just start small, because every single time you keep promises to yourself, you're telling yourself, I can trust me. And that's one of the most powerful forms of self-respect you can build. Now here's another example. I have one of my nephews who one day started crying for a blade. He really wanted it so that he could go out and play with it. I did not give it to him and he was angry with me. I probably know he thought it was unfair, but I knew that that blade could easily cut him. But the decision I made was not based on what is going to make him happy, but what was good for him. And we need to learn to do the same things for ourselves, because your future self is basically depending upon the decisions you're doing right now. So self-love isn't always giving yourself what you want. Sometimes it's giving yourself what you need. You might not need another 3 hours on TikTok. All you need might be sleep. You don't need another motivational video. All you need is to start what you've been avoiding. You don't need another excuse. All you need is to have that uncomfortable conversation. And that is discipline. It's not punishment, but it is care. So discipline is how you take care of the version of yourself that you have not yet met. Just think about it. The person you will be 5 years from now is being affected by what you're doing today. Every workout, every hour of sleep, every book you read, every skill you develop, every dollar you save, every distraction you refuse, all these things compound. And one day, your future self is going to live within the consequences of the things you're doing right now. And this should change the way you see discipline. So instead of asking, do I feel like doing it? Instead ask, would the version of me that I want to be thank me for doing this? And that's a much more better question, because your feelings change every single hour, but then your values shouldn't. You might not feel like working today, but do it anyway. You might not feel like studying, do it anyway. Not because your feelings don't matter, but because they don't get the final vote. And that's where the dopamine gap becomes important. You know, we've trained ourselves to expect pleasure immediately. Every single time we open our phones, we get instant entertainment. But then meaningful things don't work that way. Fitness takes time. Money takes time. Skills take repetition. Building a career takes years. Changing your character takes even longer. So if you constantly feed yourself instant pleasure, normal life starts feeling boring. And that's what I usually call the dopamine gap. But then discipline helps you to close this gap. But then, at the end of the day, discipline is not about being some emotionless machine, but it's about becoming someone you can rely on. Someone who doesn't abandon himself whenever things become uncomfortable. Someone who doesn't trade his future for 5 minutes of pleasure. Someone who can say no when saying yes would be the easy way. Someone who can say, I don't feel like doing this, but this is the good thing for me. And that's the greatest form of self-love. So here's what I want you to do today. Pick one thing you've been avoiding. Not 10, just one. Maybe it's cleaning your room, or going for a run, or studying for 30 minutes, or working on your business idea, or even if just putting your phone away for some time, or going to bed on time. Whatever it is, just do it. Not because you hate yourself, but because you love yourself enough to stop making excuses for yourself. And then tomorrow you do it again. And that's how you rebuild trust in yourself. That's how you become disciplined, and that's how you start respecting yourself. You know, self-love sometimes looks like a nice meal. Sometimes it looks like rest. Sometimes it looks like forgiveness. But sometimes self-love looks like getting out of the bed when you don't feel like doing it. It looks like closing the app, like doing the work, like keeping the promise, and choosing the life you want over the comfort you get right now. So discipline isn't the opposite of self-love. Discipline is what self-love looks like when it grows up.